When I started this Why You Remember series, I wanted to bring attention to shows, to film, to content that made a lasting impact in some way, whether it be genre, writing, art style, or even how it extended into and pervaded popular culture. Yet every single time I sat down to write an episode in that series, I couldn't stop thinking about this.
And I was too scared to go on the big roller coaster, so you called me a weenie.
This was not genre-changing. It wasn't perfect, it definitely wasn't art, it was weird, strangely written, and in no way self-aware. But for some reason, I think about it every time I sit down to write these episodes. I still remember Victorious, and after I thought more about it and sat down and rewatched almost all of it, I started to realize why I remembered it so well, and maybe why so many other people still do. Victorious may not have been a perfect show, but it was designed to be popular, and there was really nothing else like it.
It was 1934 when my husband left me. Alone. Living on the prairie was a dreary existence.
Everything about Victorious is surprisingly calculated. In 2008, Nickelodeon signed Victoria Justice to a talent deal, which essentially hands her career, television, film, music, all of it over to the network. Yeah, it's not always a great idea. And after Dan Schneider met Justice while filming Zoey 101, she mentioned that she had gone to a performing arts school. This was around the very same time that High School Musical was dominating popular culture worldwide, and so Nickelodeon and Schneider saw an opportunity. They wanted to capitalize on the success of Disney's giant new IP, so they came up with a very simple idea, one that would not only allow them to potentially create and sell music, but would also create a platform to launch Victoria Justice's solo music career into the stratosphere. As we all now know, Nickelodeon put those metaphorical eggs into the wrong basket. But at the time, Nickelodeon wanted to replicate what Disney had accomplished with Hannah Montana and High School Musical. And so, Victorious was born. But what was so different about it? Why do I still remember this? Well, that's actually kind of interesting.
How does a person go from an A to a D?
Happened to me in 8th grade.
It starts with really having no shame in how it flipped character archetypes, even if it was ridiculous. There is no hero protagonist in Victorious. In fact, Victoria herself is very flawed. Almost every character in this show really smartly subverts expectations. Jade is the mean, popular girl, but she's also a friend, kind of, and cares sometimes. She never really fits the mold of a villain. She's almost an anti-hero in some ways. There's really no comparison to her in that era of television, or even now. Robbie is the typical nerd that somehow found his way into the popular social circle, but he almost always carries around a ventriloquist dummy named Rex and displays actual talent. He's the smart guy gone rogue. He's memorable. Even Kat, who is dumb, outgoing, even obnoxious, manages through an incredibly annoying voice and absolutely absurd writing to be a strange outlier of what is normally a totally forgettable archetype. What Victorious manages to do is take the kids you've seen 1,000 times in shows and movies and reorganize their generic personality traits into these new molds, and it ends up creating some of the most unique, interesting, layered, and annoying characters in television. And in doing so, they created these characters that were unlike anything people were watching at the time, unlike anything that was being created at the time, especially amongst these networks, the Nickelodeons, the Disneys of the world. This is the total opposite of the very generic characters of Schneider's previous show, Zoey 101. And Chase was the dorky friend. Quinn was a smart girl, and it goes on and on. Those characters fit very particular molds that we had seen before. And even if they were explored better, it was Victorious' characters that were harder to forget. But it's actually what the show learns from Zoey 101 that also made it unique.
I sing a song for you, and if you like it, I get to stay at Hollywood Arts.
And if I don't, bye-bye.
If I were to ask you what you most remember about Zoey 101, I think 9 out of 10 people would answer the question the exact same way. This place, Pacific Coast Academy. Zoey 101 was fantasy fuel for its audience. Everybody wanted to go to PCA. It was half the reason people even watched the show. Schneider knew that, and he learned from that. He designed the world and setting of Victorious from the ground up to be that very same fantasy, reset and even more calculated. To circle back to the original context, in 2009 when Victorious finally hit television screens, musicals and theater were in the midst of its biggest boom in popular culture, maybe ever. American Idol was must-see TV, Hannah Montana was hitting the Billboard Hot 100, and High School Musical 3 had just made hundreds of millions of dollars in theaters and merch. So, Schneider created the ultimate school fantasy, combined all of those things. A very exclusive performing arts school in one of the most glamorous locations in the country, Hollywood Arts, where the students live in million-dollar apartments and sing on cars. Victorious knew what its audience was watching outside of that show. It knew what they wanted, and it repurposed PCA's fantasy into that very thing. Hollywood Arts was awesome. It was glamorous, and the teachers were lovable, and everyone looked like this. Whereas shows like Ned's Declassified were all about getting through the tough parts of school, dealing with the bullies, sweating in class, and weasels, Hollywood Arts was instead about being a superstar, it was about creating this alternate universe that its audience wanted to be a part of. It was about grounding the fantasy of fame. And Hollywood Arts was a place that was hard to forget because it was the source of all of this. Even today, I still wish I could have gone there. And because the school was more grounded than PCA's college campus, it felt like a practical place you could actually see yourself going to school at, even in the midst of all of its fantasy elements. But what I really think the show did well is identify who it was they were making the show for, even if it was in some weird ways.
You know what? I don't care. Go out with Meredith. Enjoy her cupcakes.
A few months ago, I made this video about the formula that worked so well for Drake and Josh and the episode that utilized that formula to the greatest effect. And in it, I mentioned that Drake and Josh was the culmination of the TeenNick effort, or the TeenNick era. TeenNick was a great idea. There's a market of people that want content just for them, and they're the same people that were just watching your cartoons a few years prior, so the idea was to keep those people on the network, keep them on that channel, create a place for both. Victorious was at the tail end of the TeenNick experiment or movement as it originally existed, but importantly, it became most memorable for not talking down to the people watching it, which the best TeenNick shows did. Yes, the show was ridiculous, it was consistently absurd, but it didn't shy away from actually being for teens. There was more elevated humor, these characters had realistic physical relationships, they behaved like people their age actually would when it comes to social interaction, again, even if that was amped up to absurdity. And because of that, the show grounded some of its ridiculousness. It was reasonable to care about their relationships, to want to see those relationships and people grow, because at their best, they didn't feel quite as childish as everything else that you were seeing on similar networks. Victorious created a plastic, fantastical mirror for the people watching it to invest in. And they did it by portraying their teens as teens, not kids. So many Nick shows and Disney shows in particular made it a practice to treat its audience like toddlers, to pander to them, to talk down to them. Victorious, for the most part, avoided that. Victorious did not end up accomplishing what I think Nick, the network, really wanted it to. It didn't launch Victoria Justice's music career. It didn't really lead to a successful spin-off in the quickly canceled Sam and Cat, and it only lasted 3 seasons. But as a show, it was a calculated, almost unforgettable success despite its inconsistent quality. It managed to create a set of extremely idiosyncratic characters, it created a setting and world that was incredibly easy to latch onto, and it understood and spoke directly to the people watching it, instead of below or over their heads. And while it wasn't nearly the show that Drake and Josh probably was, it proved that Schneider had perfected this TeenNick formula and that it could be successful for as long as Nickelodeon threw money at it. Victorious was a microcosm, and very near the finale of a TeenNick era that an entire generation grew up on. There really wasn't a show on TV like it, and I'm not entirely sure that the network is even equipped to create something like it again today. It's this great, weird relic, a time capsule of a network at its height. But yeah, you know, this is a little weird.
Rex, can you hear me? Speak to me, buddy!
Meant for me and I'm meant for you.
That is it for today's episode of Nerdstalgic. If you enjoyed this video, guys, press that like button down below. Also, if you haven't yet done so, press the subscribe button right next to it. That just makes sure you won't miss anything I upload onto this channel. Also, next to the subscribe button, there's a little bell. That little bell just makes sure you're actually notified when I upload a video. So if you press that little bell, you'll get a notification when I upload, which helps me and you. Make sure you don't miss anything, like I said. And as always, on your screen right now are 2 more episodes of Nerdstalgic, so you can see what I've done recently or in the past, maybe something you missed, so you can click on either of those 2 videos, check those out, and hopefully I will see you guys in the next video.